everyone, this is Mrs. Bowen. Today we are going to start Unit 13, which is World War II. So let's go ahead and update our table of contents. Today is the 22nd, April 22nd, 2020, and your topic is World War II, the European theater. So go ahead and update your table of contents. Here is our standard for today. It says describe the major conflicts and outcomes, include North American, Pacific, and European theaters. So I have gone ahead and put those where they go. So the places are the North African, Pacific, and European theaters. The events and things are major conflicts and outcomes, and our action verb says to describe. So go ahead and make your page look like this. This right here is your title, World War II European Theater, and you only need a little bit of room. We're just going to write down who is the Allied powers and who is the Axis powers, but you need the majority of the space on your paper for these boxes down here. So if you want to pause your video and fill out your chart, I think it makes it easier to find information when you're doing, say, an open note quiz. If you follow this format, I see that some people aren't in their notes. It's not the end of the world, but I think this just makes it easier to find information, and that's why I'm asking you to do it like this. Okay, so let's start with the Allied powers and the Axis powers. So on the right side of your paper, at the top, right here, let's write the Axis powers include Italy, Germany, and Japan. And just an overview here, remember we have Mussolini's fascist party, and they believed in the supreme power of the state, and they are going to cooperate with Germany from 1936 onward. Germany is Hitler's Nazi party, believed in an all-powerful state, territorial expansion, and ethnic purity. They invade Poland in 1939, France in 1940, and USSR in 1941, and that's what we're about to talk about. And Japan, they have military leaders who pushed for territorial expansion. They attacked Manchuria in 1931. They invaded China in 1937 and attacked Pearl Harbor in 1941. You don't need to write down this information. I'm just doing it as kind of a preview for what we're going to do today. You do need to write down the names of the countries. So under Axis, write Italy, Germany, and Japan. The Allies include the United States, Great Britain, France, and we will throw USSR there. So the United States passed neutrality acts in 1935, 37, and 39, gave Lend-Lease aid to Britain, China, and the USSR, and declared war on Japan in 1940. We are not going to talk about the United States in World War II because this is world history. You will definitely talk about it next year. So just know that you'll get that other piece of the puzzle next year. Great Britain tried to appease Hitler by allowing his territorial growth. He declared war on Germany in 1939, resisted German attack in 1940, and received U.S. aid through the Lend-Lease program and the cash and carry provision. Next is France. Along with Great Britain, they tried to appease Hitler. They declared war on Germany in 1939 after Poland was invaded, and France will be occupied by Nazis. Then we have the USSR. Remember, they are communists led by the harsh dictator Joseph Stalin, who created an industrial power. They signed a Non-Aggression Pact with Germany in 1939, but they received U.S. aid and eventually fought with the Allies to defeat Germany. So just make sure you have a list of your Axis and Allied powers. Okay, here's a map that is showing the European and African, what we call theaters of war. This is where the wars took place. Today, we're only going to focus on the European theater, so that is this area up here. And I want to point out a couple of things before we get started. See here that we have Germany Austria and Italy are all in the middle of Europe. They kind of divide Europe, and these countries are going to be working together in Europe, in the European theater. And then in the light purple here and over here, these are the places that the Axis powers are going to go and get control. They do not take control of the United Kingdom. They do not take control of all of the Soviet Union. They do get control of a little bit of the Soviet Union. And then we'll talk about, tomorrow we'll talk about Pacific theater and North African theater. Here's the North African theater down here. Okay, so let's jump into it first with the Non-Aggression Pact. In August of 1939, Hitler and Joseph Stalin signed a Non-Aggression Pact in which they agreed not to go to war with each other. So they're not going to be aggressive with each other. And they also agreed to divide Poland between them. And if we look on this map, you can see that the Soviet Union is right here, and Germany is right here, and Poland is right there in the middle. And one reason the Soviet Union would love to have Poland is because it would give them access to the North Sea up here. And it would also put them a little bit more into Europe, so they would have more influence in Europe. Germany just wants more land. So that's why they're saying they would want half of Poland. In September of 1939, Germany's army advanced quickly into Poland, utilizing a strategy that would, by 1941, facilitate the German conquest of most of Europe. This is called the Blitzkrieg. It is a strategy in which Germany used airplanes and tanks, and they advanced quickly, surprising the enemy before they could defend themselves. And then a massive infantry force followed and secured German control of the territory. Britain and France declare war on Germany after the invasion of Poland, but little happened until April of 1940. This is the strategy, the Blitzkrieg. This is the strategy that Germany and Hitler uses to conquer most of the European continent. And really, they have the advantage of a surprise attack because people were not expecting for Hitler to be so bold and go in and attack all of these countries like he did. Nobody really expected it. Germany invades Denmark and Norway. So in April 1940, Germany advances into Denmark and Norway. With this invasion, full-scale war erupts in Europe, and German forces quickly move, and by 1941, they have control of all of continental Europe, except for the neutral countries, the countries that didn't want to get into it, which were Sweden, Switzerland, and Spain. So you can see on this map, this like yellow area with the green lines on it. These are all of the countries that the Axis powers go in and take over in the span of a year. So they were very busy. Okay, so the next one is Germany attacks Britain. So Germany had already had control over all of continental Europe. So Britain is the only country that really remained free. So the Nazi Air Force began a devastating bombing campaign of British infrastructures and cities. And the bombing of Britain, or called the Battle of Britain, was horrible for the people that lived there because a lot of people lived in London, and this is where most of the damage took place. This bottom picture down here is a picture of a subway underground where people had to go down there and just stay down there whenever there was a bombing raid that took place. It was really, really hard for the British people, but they did not give up. it was unsuccessful in forcing a British surrender. So in May of 1941, Hitler calls off the attacks and he decides to focus on Eastern Europe. All right. So let's look at what happens when Germany attacks the USSR. So remember, they had a non-aggression pact that said they would not fight each other, but Hitler goes against that. He violates the non-aggression pact and he invaded the Soviet Union. The Soviets had the advantage because they had a large territory, they had a lot of manpower, and the extreme cold weather. Remember when we talked about what stopped Napoleon, that it was the very cold weather in Russia, that he couldn't take over Russia? Same thing happens with Hitler. The Soviets stop the Germans' advance, and they push them back in the Battle of Stalingrad. So with the USSR being able to push Hitler back, this is his first defeat, and this is only going to eventually allow the Allies to win. So the Allies advance. The Allies liberate North Africa from Axis control in May, and they invaded Italy in July of 1943. So they started to make gains in taking back land, and part of that was in May of 1944. It was a massive force made up of British, American, Canadian, and French troops that landed on the coast of Normandy in France. This is called the D-Day Invasion. The D-Day Invasion surprised the Germans, who expected the invasion to come 300 kilometers to the north, near the French port of Calais. From Normandy, the Allies moved south and liberated Paris, and then turned east and moved toward Germany. So here's a picture up here. This is a picture of the Normandy invasion. You can see the boats. Over here, you can see these balloon airplane-y things, which I forgot what they're called. And then you can see troops moving on the ground. It was a huge, large-scale operation trying to go in and push Hitler back. And this picture down here is in Paris, France. This is the Arc de Triomphe. And you've got an American flag, you've got French flags, and everybody is celebrating because they took Paris back. Because Paris is an important city. All right. Meanwhile, the Soviet troops moved into Poland and Romania, and the Allied advance from the west was slowed for just a minute for the German offensive in the Ardennes forest, which led to the Battle of the Bulge. But by early spring of 1945, the Allies entered Germany from the east and the west on May 7th, 1945. And this is the day that Germany surrenders. It's called VE Day, for Victory in Europe Day. If you ever hear that and you're like, what does that mean? VE Day, Victory in Europe. VJ Day is Victory over Japan. We'll talk about that later. So Germany surrenders unconditionally, and in the midst of this defeat, Hitler commits suicide in his underground bunker in Berlin. And that is basically the European theater in World War II in a nutshell. And it is, I mean, I'm just telling you the facts, basically. We're not going into it very deeply. We will talk about the Holocaust in one of the standards, and we will talk about, I think we talk about the battles as well in this unit. So we'll get into that stuff a little bit more later, but that's all we're going to cover today for the European theater. Tomorrow we'll do the Pacific theater and the North African theater. I hope you guys have a fantastic day. Bye.